Hey everyone, welcome back to the sixth module on the Ultimate Denver House Hacking course. Today, we'll be talking about analyzing house hack deals. So my name is Chris Lopez. I'm one of the hosts of this course series. I'm an investor-friendly real estate agent at YourCast Real Estate, and my co-hosts are Jeff White, who's our Ultimate House Hacking coach, and Joe Massey, who is our preferred lender. How's it going, guys?
Fantastic. Great to see you today. As you mentioned, I'm with Castle & Cook Mortgage, Senior Loan Officer, Branch Manager, helping people finance investment properties, primary residence, house hacks, all sorts of long-term permanent residential financing. And I'm excited we've got our good friend Jeff White on the show today. Jeff, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks, Joe. I'm excited to be here. I'm an active Denver house hacker and also house hacking coach. I've seen it all, so I'm can help with any type of problem you encounter, whether it's your first house hack, second house hack, up leasing the property, dealing with tenant issues, finding the right property, anything, or finding the right tenants for your property, and all the above. So let's get rolling.
Sounds good. So today we'll be talking about how to analyze deals. And you'll notice one of the common themes we have throughout this series. There's the while you're living there, and there's the after you move out. So we'll talk about doing deal analyses on both, but as we've talked about in previous modules, all three of us feel that the after you move out analysis is by far the most important aspect when it comes to buying a house hack property, because you're going to live there for 1 or 2 years, and you may have the rental for 10 to 30 years. So having it as it makes sense as a long-term rental property, as a building block to help you build income, get cash flow, increase equity, and buy more properties, that's much more important than while you're living there. So I'm going to pull up some spreadsheets. Give me a second to get them over. And so we got 2 properties we'll walk through today. One's going to be a room-by-room house hack rental in Aurora, and we'll go through numbers about while living there and after moving out. And then we've got one that is a house hack with some Airbnb income while they're living there and a long-term model afterwards. So we'll run through both of those. And before we start diving into numbers, Jeff, let me start with you. You got any high-level points or tips to share with people on the do's and don'ts of analyzing properties?
I would say be more conservative with your numbers. Assume more just in general. If you're thinking you're gonna rent by the room and it's gonna be, I'll get $800 for these rooms because I'm in a great location or they're nice rooms. I would scale that back and start at 700. Be the conservative one, and then if you actually can get $800 a room, congratulations, you're great. You're better than you thought. And then your numbers are even better. But be more conservative to start, so it's more realistic number than just looking at it saying being aggressive with your assumptions. I'm with 2 blocks of downtown Denver. I should get this, because you might just overestimate, and then it'll drive these numbers that might not be realistic. So it's better to be more realistic in the front end and then surprise yourself in the back end.
And the mistake I see is that it's not on the rental side. It's people being very light on the operating expense side. They think, I'll make all this rental income and I have no expenses. And I see that on the MLS, from people selling properties, see that people underwriting that way. Make sure you put in realistic underwriting numbers for your expenses as well. So what we have on the screen right now is actually a copy of Joe Massey's spreadsheet. I know a lot of people are going to be listening to this on the podcast, so if you cannot see it, do not worry about it. We're going to just do a very high level talking about numbers and some assumptions. It's not meant to be a click-by-click tutorial. Now, if you need that click-by-click tutorial, go to the website, denverinvestmentrealestate.com, click on spreadsheets, and you'll see it under rental property spreadsheet on there. We got a couple YouTube videos, one on house hacking, one on long-term rentals, one on the other tabs on there, which is more of a tutorial on there. And also you can download the spreadsheet off of there as well. Or if you can't find it, email us. We're happy to send it to you as well. So just putting in the very high-level details in here. And guys, I'm going to run through, so definitely interrupt me as we get rolling through this. I selected this as a primary residence, since Joe's spreadsheet allows you to designate a primary residence versus investment property. And Joe, why do we have that in there? Why do you have that field to choose between the two?
Because it's going to help you make good choices on how much money you're putting down. So if you select, in fact, go ahead and do this for folks that are watching, go ahead and select it as an investment property and leave it with 5% down. It's going to give you a little warning that says, hey, you know what? You're going to need to put more money down. Minimum down payment for an investment property is 15% for a single family home. So it's got some things built in there just to keep you from, making an error that is going to give you results that aren't realistic. Go ahead and change it back to primary residence. And if you would, Chris, change your down payment to 0%. So, I thought it would give you an error. There we go. See, look, got to add that in there. But 5% should be your minimum down for primary. I guess, you know why I took that out was for VA.
VA loans.
Yeah, that's right. I remember taking that out a while ago. But it's got some little things in there that'll help you. If you're putting in something that's not realistic, it'll give you a warning. So that's why that's in there.
Yeah, so it's really nice. I mean, it's just one of those things that helps you make sure you're not putting stuff incorrect and helps just, guide you along the way. So what we did, this is actually a client that I was a real estate agent on, Joe was a lender on, and it's a property, a single family home, 5-bedroom house in Aurora we closed on in Q1 of 2019. So these are, these are the real numbers on here from the transaction and also on some operating data from the property. So the client put down 5%. He opted to pay the mortgage insurance monthly. And I'll talk about this here because when he went under contract, me and my team, we sent the contract over to Joe and his team, and then Joe reviewed it. They got our client in there within a couple of days, and they sat down and said, hey, here are the options for prepaying PMI. Here's some options for buying down points. All stuff we talked about a few modules ago, and this is actually exactly what we did. So it made the most sense for him just to pay monthly because I don't know the exact number, but I recall it was a very low monthly mortgage insurance amount. Purchase price was $375,000. His acquisition cost were just about $7,500. So this includes inspection, appraisal, all the closing fees, title fees. And in this case, he also did buy the interest rate down some as well. And that's why the acquisition cost is higher than we've seen some other properties because he decided to buy the interest rate down. His loan cost, that's a set fee that Joe charges, $1,540. So if you put 5% down of $375,000, he had his down payment percentage was $18,750. Add in the acquisition cost and loan cost, about $9,000. And then we had a $1,000 seller credit for something on the inspection items. So all in, his cash to close between his earnest money and his final wire in to the closing table was $26,765. So very, very low cash to close. Now, Joe, if I came to you and wanted to buy this property, but I wanted to buy as a landlord, what would be the ballpark I'd be putting down at the closing table?
You know what? I don't even have to give you a ballpark. Scroll up and I'll show you exactly what it would be.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Change that to investment. Change that to 15% down. There you go. Minimum $64,265.
Yeah. And I just wanted to do that just to, again, highlight the difference in, one of the sweet things about house hacking is how low in cash to close it really is to buy, great assets here in Denver. So I'm switching things back to what we had, primary residence, 5%. His interest rate was 3.875%, and these are all fields we plugged in here. So we're going to get into some meaty parts about the house hacking. So this is a 5-bedroom house, and 4 people can definitely live there comfortably. So the owner was going to live in 1 unit and rent out the other 3 bedrooms. And he was doing that to get everything up and running, get it filled in. And those 3 roommates are going to basically pay for most of his expenses. And then once everyone's in there, he's going to see if he can get a 5th person in there to see if people can live comfortably in there or not. Just because of the way it's set up, it's a great set for 4 people. He said 5 people might be pushing it. So he got... and this is the numbers for once he moves out, and we can change it for while he lives there as well. But he got 3 leases at $800 in each, no problem. And he lives in the 4th bedroom. And so we're assuming once he moves out that he'll rent out for $800 as well. And what his plan was, we put a vacancy at 5%. And that's because he felt very confident that he had his leases set to turn or come due at the exact same time when the nearby school, he lives near a medical campus in Aurora, when the nearby programs and schools out there, when they come due, I don't know the exact year, but 2 semesters a year. He said, if you're timed with that, you'll have a low vacancy. Now, Jeff, when I initially underwrote this, I used a much higher vacancy, but he was very comfortable with a lower vacancy. When you're doing your room by room rentals, what do you use for vacancy?
I use 3%, 3 to 4%.
Really?
Yeah.
And you found that over your few years of doing it, you found vacancy to be that low?
Yeah, the reason is as long as you're on top of it. So, for example, if the lease is ending, the person's moving out, like my current place, someone's moving out on April 30th. I started looking for the new person in March. So you start looking sooner, and there's so much interest for renting by the room as long as you price it right that you should have no problem filling that vacancy and having shooting for zero vacancy. But the reality is sometimes you'll have little gaps. They might move out in the middle of the month, or it might take that person that wants to move in wants to wait like to the middle, first week or something. So you have like little tiny gaps, so that increases your vacancy. But yeah, that's as long as you're on top of it, you can keep it low. But 5% is a good number.
Good. So I always underwrite my properties at 3 to 5%, depending on a few factors. Joe, what do you use for this?
I like to use 5% as well. Just, I've got a property manager, so I don't manage it as tightly as Jeff does. I know my property manager is on top of it, but I like to use 5. It's pretty conservative. I don't know. I certainly think that with active management like Jeff does, you can have that number lower, but I like to do 5 because I'm not hyper focused on it, frankly.
And so going down the spreadsheet, we selected no for property management because we talked about, finding a property manager room by room. Very few and far between here in Denver. So we selected no, and we come back and change this number later. And we put in 8% for monthly repairs for repairs and reserves maintenance. So that's 8% of the rents he collects. So as a really rough rule of thumb, using 8% is a really good ballpark to start with, and you'll want to fine tune from there based on the property type, location, age, condition, and all that. And so basically 8% works out to be about 1 month's worth of rent for the entire year. Now, Jeff, what do you use for your repairs and reserves? What figures do you use for your properties?
Yeah, so I just do the same thing right here. So for maintenance reserves, I use definitely, it depends on the year, how old the property is and the updates. So if it's like before 1990, so like most ranch style houses were built in the 50s and 70s, some 80s, at least for house hacks. So I do probably closer to 10%. And then if it's newer, built in the 90s, 2000s, then you could probably lower to 5 to 8%, just because it's a little bit less maintenance because you have newer stuff. It's not as high because it's a little more updated, and you don't have to worry about as many things. Like, for example, the furnace isn't like 30 years old. Probably not. So you don't have to worry about the furnace going out as soon as like an older place, and just slightly newer, a little bit better shape. So that's where newer, older properties, and some older properties are better shape than newer properties. So just something to weigh out from the inspection report, like, okay, how much work is needed here, and then factor that into your numbers.
Yep. And that's where it comes in. You just have to look at the age and condition of the property, because as Jeff said, a lot of those ranchers are the 60s and 70s. We buy a lot of those. And sometimes we buy properties that are completely rehabbed. Well, if it's a new furnace, a new AC, new mechanical systems, all this other new stuff, new roof, new windows, you're going to have lower reserves than average. But over the long run, 8% to 10% is a really good, realistic, and conservative number to use. So we'll come back and play with this in a minute and actually bump up to 10%. And the rest in here is pretty straightforward. Taxes are just over $2,200 a year. His annual property insurance is about $1,000 a year. And I mean, Joe, you see a lot of insurance rates. That's definitely lower than what you normally see for a house, right? For an owner-occupied house.
That's pretty low. I would guess that this property probably has a new roof. That is one of the biggest indicators that I see in Denver right now. if you've got a roof that's less than 5 years old, you're going to get a big break on your property insurance. And it's just due to the frequency of hail claims that we have now. If you've got a roof that's, 3 layers and 25 years since it's been replaced, your insurance is probably going to be $2,000, $2,200 a year. So I remember this one, and it was, recently updated, which you can tell because there was no initial repair costs, and did have a newer roof. But yeah, that is a super low rate. So you definitely want to not estimate $900 for your insurance. Probably when you're initially looking at it, figure $1,800 a year. And then as you get into the inspection and you learn, hey, it's new roof, new updated mechanical, new electrical. Okay, maybe we can get some discounts from, State Farm or Allstate or whomever, then get your quote to plug it in. But I certainly would not start with that $900 as my initial estimate.
Agreed. So water, and so this is some real operating data from the last few months he's been running it, and we just averaged out for a year, about $100 a month for water and sewer, so about $1,200 a month, or I'm sorry, $1,200 a year. And as we talked about, all the utilities are in his name, and then he just charges that as part of the monthly rent, as Jeff talked about in the previous module. Trash is just under $300 a year. Excel, looks like about $1,500 for a year. And then, as we also discussed earlier, he provides Wi-Fi for all of his tenants, so it's about $600 a year, about $50 a month. So any numbers that we're missing on there, guys, before we look at the results?
I don't think so. I think it looks great.
Yep.
So again, we're going to talk about these numbers. This is assuming that he's already moved out, and then we'll come back and start playing with some numbers here. So I'm clicking over the next tab on Joe's spreadsheet, and the numbers come out on, it just restates the numbers and actually shows you, adds up the rents, adds up the expenses, subtracts out the expenses, subtracts out the mortgage payments, does an estimate for the mortgage insurance, and then it gives you the annual cash flow before taxes. So right now, once he moves out, he should be making about $4,971 a year. Jeff, what's your reaction?
That is a solid number because it's low down payment, and it sounds like if I turn that annual monthly payment and the PMI into monthly, he's pretty much covering it while he's living there or close to it. And then when he moves out, he's cash flowing. So that's an excellent deal.
And actually, I know this. I mean, his mortgage insurance is lower than the estimated 128 in the spreadsheet. So it should actually be better cash flow.
Oh, nice.
Joe, what's your reaction? You see a number close to 5,000 in cash flow.
You know what? I think for putting, what do we put down? $26,000. That's great. Yep. Look at the cash on cash return. That's 18.6%. I don't know about you, but I don't get that on my 401k. Certainly not recently. So I think that's a terrific return, just straight on the cash flow. But then I know we're going to talk about the ROIQ. Looking at the details down there, I think this is a tremendous deal. And this was not something that the client had to go out and knock on 500 doors. He didn't have to send out a bunch of mailers. Remembering from prior modules, the where to find the deal quadrant, this was on the MLS. This was on the shelf right there for anybody to pick up, and super good deal.
Yeah. And so Joe referenced the return on investment quadrant, which is a great visual guide from our buddy James Orr. Shows you the 4 ways to make money in real estate. We will not go through all those details now, but Joe and I teach classes on there. There's an in-depth blog post and podcast website as well. So if you want the details on that, definitely go listen, because that's a solid hour class right there. That should definitely open your eyes as to how you make money in real estate. And it's way more than just cash flow. So I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet and play around with some numbers here. So we're estimating we'll save $5,000 an annual cash flow once he moves out. So let's go back and change the rent to while he's living there. So he's doing $800 a month in rent. So 4 times 8 is 32. If we subtract that 1 bedroom, that's $2,400 in rent from 3 roommates. We'll change nothing else. Oh, well, shoot. Now he's got a negative cash flow of $3,400. Joe, what's your reaction?
$3,400, if that's the cost for him to live in that bedroom for the course of a year, I think that is a great deal. That's just over or just under $300 a month.
Yep.
I don't know anywhere else in Denver that you can live for $300 a month. My mortgage payment certainly isn't $300 a month.
Yeah, Jeff, would you rent him a room for $300 a month?
Oh, that'd be like a half a room, maybe like a closet. I could get through. But no, that's $300 a month, and then all the other tax benefits, other returns, return on investment he's getting besides this is only pure cash flow. So there's other benefits he's getting, and then when he goes to buy the next property, it'll be that much easier, and then he will get that 5,000 or more.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go back here and go add in the $3,200 a month in rent because we wanted to show you the numbers while he's living there. So he owns an asset, he's building wealth through equity, and he's living for, we'll just say $300 a month. Great play. And now when he moves out, his plan is to keep renting it room by room for at least for the first couple of properties he does, just to build the cash flow, help get that momentum going. And then, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, he's going to do a long-term rental because he's hopefully kind of gotten that initial push over with. But he wants to do the room-by-room rentals to maximize cash flow. So if we bump up the maintenance and reserves to 10% from 8%, we'll see what that makes the cash flow drop by $700 a year from $4,900 to $4,200. So not a big deal. I mean, if you're having that much cash flow positive, I think everyone's going to be happy. Now let's go back and look at this as a long-term rental. I'm going to change it back to 8%. And then for a long-term rental like this, a 5-bedroom Aurora, I mean, $2,500 is going to be a pretty conservative number on here, at least in today's market. Maybe a little bit more, but in 3 or 4 years, once he turns it to a long-term rental most likely have gone up slightly as well, but we'll use today's rental numbers of $2,500. Well, now it shows a negative cash flow of $2,337 a year. Joe, does that sound good or bad to you?
I think that's okay. He's basically subsidizing the ownership of the property. But if you look at the ROIQ, so cash flow is not great, right? He's putting in $200 a month, but he's still getting a 96% return. So cash flow is not great, but he's subsidizing the cash flow to get appreciation benefits, debt pay down, depreciation, et cetera. So, and the headache factor is less, right? So I think it's still pretty good.
I do too. And some of the things to think about on here is, this is going to be 3 or 4 years in the future, most likely. Rents will probably have gone up since then. And $2,500 a month is a, realistic on the conservative side for what he could get. Plus, you got to keep in mind, he put 5% down. 5% down is not meant to be an investment loan. It's meant to be a primary loan. So he's got PMI. The PMI on the spreadsheet's $1,500 a year. Well, when that drops off, a few years down the road or 9 years down the road, well, that's going to be $1,500 less he's paying. Well, now he'll only be, negative $50 a month with very conservative underwriting for long-term wealth building. That's not a bad play. And so we'll talk more in the next module on the personal finances. Is this one the balance you have to figure out? Some people say, hey, no matter what, I never, ever can have a negative cash flowing property, even for a day once I move out of the property. I just can't. And that's fine. And this, we have to learn your risk tolerance. Personally, if I was doing this, I would be fine with a slight, with tight numbers like this, because this is very close to break even with our conservative underwriting. And the balance here is if you have high leverage like this, is make sure you keep cash in the bank, because we can run numbers all day long. And if I got $100,000 to spend and I buy one investment property and I put $100,000 all in, but I have zero left in the bank, but I'm making, $3,000 a year in cash flow. But Jeff buys a house hack and he puts 25 grand down and has 75 grand in the bank. And when he moves out, it's a break-even property. Who's better positioned? Who do you think's better set up, Jeff? Me or you?
That'd be me.
Why?
Yeah. Because I have, if things go wrong, if it takes, what if the tenant trashes a place and it's $20,000 of work? What do? You have to pull out, get credit cards and very high levered debt. Versus me, I could just cover it just like that, worst case scenario. Or if the tenant leaves and something like, right, I can't do showing or can't show it for 6 months, and then 6 months of vacancy, I could cover the mortgage for those 6 months versus you would have trouble, or you have to take out a lot of debt to cover that, and then put yourself in a terrible financial position.
I agree with that. What are your thoughts, Joe?
I agree 100%.
So, okay, any final thoughts you guys want to say about this property before we move on?
I think the one thought that I want to throw out there is this is a real property. This is not like a unicorn. These are all over. If you go back a couple modules where we talked about where to find properties in the deal quadrant, this is not, we have dozens of these. This is not something that we're just showing you, all right, this is the very best deal we've ever seen. As a matter of fact, we've taken out and not shown the very best deals that we've ever seen because they're too unbelievably good. This is an average deal. This is an average transaction that we see. Nothing crazy. Client did not have to do some sort of crazy financing, didn't have to go out and do something crazy to get the property, didn't need a ton of renovation, didn't have to get a hard money loan and then renovate the property and refinance it. This was regular. This was a regular transaction on the MLS, turnkey, ready to go. That's the main point I want to drive home on this is regular, realistic, and there's more out there.
And that's what I was going to say too, is like we close on these deals pretty much every single month. Like it's a good deal, but it's a completely doable for people that just follow the process.
Yep.
All right. So I pull up the next spreadsheet. I want to do a quick reminder that we do a lot of deal analyses now on the website through the Denver Investment Real Estate website. And what happens is great. We look at a deal in Q1 of 2020. Well, if you're listening to this in 2021, a lot of the concepts still apply, but we'll see some more recent deals. Well, make sure you go to the website and find the deal analysis section, and you'll find it on there. And that's going to list all the recent properties we've done. And you can sort them by house hacking, by rental, by time, by multifamily. So if you're listening to this in the future, go to the website and you can always see updated deals so that we can see what the current market is like. Excuse me. All right, so this next property... Actually, let me just make sure I got the right one. Yep. So this next property it's another real transaction. And this property we actually closed on about a year ago. So this was in Q2 of 2019. And so I wanted to pick one a little bit older because we had some really good operating data for their Airbnb. So it's a single family house in Arvada with a great space that they can do some Airbnb with. That's got a separate entrance, a little kitchenette in there, and it's a great setup for as a house hack and a long-term rental. So they put 5% down. They chose to pay their monthly mortgage insurance, and they got the purchase. They bought for $435,000.
Hey, Chris, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah.
Scroll up just a little bit. I want to point out something. Where you've got number of units is 2. This is not a true duplex. This was a single family, I believe, with an accessory dwelling unit. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to point that out that it's not a multi-unit that would have required 15% down. This is still, for financing purposes, this is still a single family home in our eyes, and so the client was able to do this with 5% down. So for people watching, I didn't want them to see that and say, "Well, wait a minute, I thought duplex was 15% down." This is a single family with an accessory dwelling.
Great point. And just so you guys know, I did that so I could separate the rental income from the main house with the ADU.
Yep, perfect.
So we did 5%, or they did 5% down, purchase price of $435. And I recall, just so everyone knows, like this was a property of the bidding war. We beat other people and we went over asking. Is that a sin, Joe?
No, not at all. I think it's a great way to purchase properties, actually.
That's the reality in the Denver market right now. Is like a lot of times you have competition. And it's not uncommon to go over asking. So we had $435. Their acquisition cost about $5,700 for all their closing costs. They had $1,540 in loan fees to Castle and Cook. So their down payment was just under $22,000. So that's 5% of $435. Now we had $2,000 in seller credits for some inspection items. and I could not recall what they all, but just typical stuff on inspection items. And they spent about $5,000. This was on materials, and they did most of the labor themselves. It's a young couple. They were handy. They like swinging hammers, and they needed to do some updating and remodel to the mother-in-law area to get it, primed for Airbnb. Because again, they're into Airbnb and they wanted to make it a really great spot. So they spent about $5,000 plus a bunch of weekends doing it. So all in, including the repair cost, was about $32,000. So really, really low down payment amount. And when we say all in, we like to include the initial repair cost, because if you have to spend that money to get the rents we're talking about, that's when you have to put in the property. So that's something that we do to be realistic, where a lot of other people, they don't include that. So, Joe, I don't get this. Their interest rate's at 4.5%. They closed on a year ago, but this last property we talked about was at 3.75%. Why a higher interest rate?
Hey, interest rates change every single day. Sometimes they're better, sometimes they're worse. Back a year ago, rates were certainly higher than they are now, certainly higher than they were in first quarter of this year. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And I think we'll talk about in later modules is when you buy the property, interest rates are going to be wherever they're at for that particular time. And then we're going to look at, do we buy down the rate? Do we pay the mortgage insurance up front, et cetera? But then one of the considerations will be down the road, do you refinance it? Do you refinance it to get a lower rate? Do you refinance it to get cash out? Tons of variables on that.
And so looking at the rental income right now, I got unit one, the spreadsheet. This is to show the Airbnb income, and it averaged about $1,950 a month over the last, 10 months they had this operating. And so that's through the peak season, the slower season. So just under $2,000 a month in gross income after Airbnb fees. They, for the most part, were doing a lot of cleanings themselves in between tenants because they wanted to save money as well. So, they are definitely getting some more income, and they're definitely minimizing their expenses. There's no Airbnb property manager, which will typically charge 15 to 25% of your rents to manage your Airbnb. And they're doing most of the cleanings. Now, when I got this data from them, they were just starting to switch to hiring cleaners because they were getting tired of doing that themselves. Surprise, surprise. But I want to use some numbers on here for that. And the main house, which is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, they had one of their siblings, one of their sisters, live with them, and they were charging $700 a month for her to rent that room. Now, they said, hey, we know it's $100 or $200 below market rent, but it's one of those things. It's family. It's a good setup for both of them. So they're not looking to maximize the rent dollars. It's what made sense. So while they're living there, and this is between a long-term rental and the Airbnb, they're making about $2,650 a month in rental income. We put vacancy at 3% just because the Airbnb had the average, and Airbnb definitely has a much higher vacancy than normal. That's already factored in the rental income. And then property management, no. We put aside 8% for repairs and reserves to do good underwriting. Taxes, just under $1,500. Property insurance, just under $1,500. Water and sewer, just under $700. A note from the owner, it's very low because they did not turn the sprinklers to water the lawn. So that'll definitely go up in the future. Trash is $300 a year. And Excel is about $1,500 a year. So going over the cash flow tab here. Well, while they're living there, it's a negative cash flow of $4,000 a year. Jeff, what do you think about that?
Well, when they're living there, it's still a great deal. Was that $330
a month?
$330 a month to live there in a Old Town Arvada, a nice, and they just have to share it with a sibling. That sounds pretty good deal. And building equity, getting all the other benefits of owning real estate. I would take that all day long.
Yeah, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I agree 100%. If it costs you $350 to have your own home, and you're just sharing it with a sibling, and you're renting out that opposite unit, I think this is terrific. I mean, I mentioned this earlier. My mortgage payment's not $350 a month. That's basically just the taxes and the insurance. That's just a smoking good deal.
So let's look at the spreadsheet. Let me find it. the spreadsheet for once they move out. So now I flipped over a different spreadsheet. We get all the same assumptions in here: cost, down payment, interest rates, all this stuff. Now, once they move out and they're going to play by the rules and not Airbnb, since it's not their primary residence, but they'll rent out the main house, they'll rent out the mother-in-law suite, all separate. So the main house should rent between $21 to $2,200 a month, and we put in $2,100 a month to be conservative. The ADU should rent out for $1,000 to $1,100 a month. We put in $1,000 a month to be conservative. So both of those might be $100 or $200 higher. But again, as we talked about earlier, it's best to be conservative. Plugged in our typical numbers, and then we put in 8% for reserves. We removed the electric bill because that will be something paid by the tenant, but the owners will continue to pay for water and trash. And the taxes and insurance should all stay about the same. Well, now when they move out, it'll be a positive cash flow of just under $2,400 a month after all their expenses, after the mortgage payment, and after the mortgage insurance. $2,400 a month for 5% down property. I mean, that's a thumbs up in my book. What do you guys think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. $2,400, that is not life-changing money to make every year. That's $200 a month. But scroll down a little bit and look at the total returns you're getting. You're getting appreciation, debt pay down, depreciation. You're making $34,000 a year on this property, and you only invested 26 or 31,000 rather. You only invested 31 to make 34, so you're making 106%. I can assure you my 401k does not get that, but if anybody's 401k does get that, I would love to hear about it. I don't know any other way to make these types of returns other than this strategy.
Yeah, and along those lines, it's like they're buying a sweet duplex for $435,000, and then I know what we talked about before is most duplexes are overpriced and really run down. This one sounds like it just needs a little bit of work, and then getting positive cash flow after they move out. That's a win in my book, and that cash flow again is only one part of the return, and with only 2 tenants to manage, I would take that all day long as well.
Yeah. And so we'll go into more of this in one of the future modules. Just that long-term modeling is like, as Joe said, that $24 a month is not going to change your financial position, but this is that long-term play. This is accumulating properties now, making properties that are safe to buy now, and letting the time and the market do its thing. Markets appreciate, or the Denver market appreciates, rents go up. Your mortgage cost stays the same. Your rents go up, you have a bigger profit. And so if you acquire a few of these properties, you run them well, you're patient, well, in 10 to 20 years, you can build a lot of wealth. And we'll talk a lot more details about that in the future module. All right, so that's it for the 2 spreadsheets I wanted to cover. So just to round out this PowerPoint as a reminder, if you need, or if you want to see up-to-date deal analyses and a lot more we talked about now, more in depth, go to the website, denverinvestmentrealestate.com, find the deal analyses section, and you'll see all the deal analyses listed there. You can read a blog, listen to a podcast, watch a YouTube video, pick your poison. And then going forward, what you need to do is start running properties and then make sure you have someone that knows what they're doing critique the spreadsheet for you. So that's something I do for my clients, Jeff, and that's something I do for the people you work with as well. So that way, if you need someone that knows the process and knows how to run numbers, don't sit there and run 100 by yourself and figure out if it's good or not. Run 3 or 4, get with me, get with Jeff, and have them review the spreadsheet, and that way they give you feedback. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for listening. Jeff and Joe, I appreciate you guys hanging out today.
Always. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.